Hi everyone, welcome to week 4 of Management 650. My name is Helen. I'm going to show you how to solve a problem that will help you solve homework problem 10. So we have our problem up on the screen. Let's take a look at it. It says a particular ranking system determines the cost of living in the most expensive cities in the world as an index. This index scales city X as 100 and expresses the cost of living in other cities as a percentage of the city X cost. And it gives us an example. It said in 2007, the cost of living index in city Y was 124.6, and that means that it was 25% higher than city X. Now, if you look in column A, we see rankings from 1 to 15. Each of these numbers represents a city. So we're going to see a scatter plot. The problem provides us a scatter plot which shows the index for 2007 plotted against the 2006 index for 15 cities. So here's our scatter plot, and we're asked to describe the association between the cost of living indices in 2007 and 2006. Now we know that our scatter plot is the best way to begin to observe relationships between two quantitative data sets. And let's take a look at our data. In column B, we have our cost of living index for 2006. That's our X variables, and we know that our X variables represent our explanatory or prediction variables. Our cost of living index for 2007 in the next column are our Y variables. These represent variables that are our response variables. So what this means is that our cost of living index for 2006 will explain or predict our cost of living index for 2007. X explains Y. So let's take a look at our scatter plot. We have markers or data points. Each data point represents both X and Y data. And let's take a look at our horizontal axis. We have our 2006 cost of living index on our horizontal axis, our explanatory variable. Our response variable, or index 2007, is located on our vertical axis. Now we're going to look at 3 elements on our scatter plot, and those elements are going to help us understand the association between our 2006 index and our 2007 index. The first element that we're going to look at is direction or flow. And when we look at these data points, we want to look at them as a mass or a collective set of data points. And when we look at them as a collection, we see that our direction or flow goes from the lower left to the upper right. So here we have our lower left flowing up to our upper right. And this tells us that our direction or flow is positive. If our data was flowing from our upper left to our lower right, then our data flow would be negative. So our first element is our direction. And we know our direction is positive, if we can spell it. There we go. Next element we're going to look at is our form or pattern. And we're going to look to see whether our pattern is linear, whether it's curved, or whether it has some other shape. When we look at our data set, we see that pretty much our data set is in the shape of a line. Now this is positive because it's important that our pattern is linear. We know that simple regression analysis is based on a linear relationship between X and Y data. If our data patterns are curved or in some other format, then we cannot use our simple regression analysis and we have to use another model. So that's very important. So here we know that our pattern, can't spell that one either, or form is linear. Okay, our final element is we're going to look at the location, and that is where are the data points located in relation to our trend line. Now when I create scatter plot, I click on one data point, I right click, I go down to the trend line, I make sure that the radial button for linear is checked, and then I go down and I close it out. And that gives us our trend line. Now our trend line is where the data points would fall if the X and Y data were identical. The closer the data points are to this trend line, the stronger the location and the stronger the association between the cost of living indices in 2007 and 2006. And we see that in this particular trend line, our data markers are clustered close to the trend line. So we can say that our location shows a strong association. If those data points were located farther out and away from that trend line, then we might conclude that we had a weak or a moderate association. So we have a positive, linear, strong assessment of the association between the cost of living indices in 2007 and 2006 based on our observation of this scatter. Our second question asks us to interpret R squared. R squared is correlation squared. I'm going to repeat that. R squared is correlation squared. It is the proportion of the data's variation as represented in the model. In other words, it's the proportion of the variation of the Y data as explained by the variability of the X data. And we are going to calculate our correlation of this data set. So how do we calculate correlation? We know that our R squared is 0.772. Our problem gives us that value. We know that correlation is the square root of R squared. So it's a very simple Excel formula. Just click on that cell and input equal, type SQRT, open your parenthesis, that's a shift 9, and type in 0.772. We do a shift 10, which closes those parentheses. We press enter. What does an 87.9% correlation mean? It means that 87.9% of the cost of living index for 2007 can be explained by the cost of living index of 2006. It is a strong correlation, and it indicates that the strength of the linear relationships between the cost of living index for 2006 and the cost of living index for 2007 is strong. And this supports our preliminary conclusions that we made when we just examined our scatter plot. Our question 4 asks us to predict the 2000 cost of living index for City 2. There's a couple of ways we can do this. We can calculate this solution by using a formula, the regression equation formula, and that we would derive from our scatter plot. The other way we can do this is to perform a regression analysis in Excel. I'm going to show you both methods. And the first method will be using the scatter plot and the regression equation formula. So on our scatter plot, we are again going to click our scatter plot markers, our data points. We'll right click those. We'll go down to where it says add a trend line. We'll make sure that linear is checked, the radial box is checked, and then we're going to click display equation on chart. And then we're going to click close. And right here we have an equation that provides us with our y-intercept of 10.423 and our slope, which is 0.9922, and we can take these two variables and insert them into our regression equation. So let's take a look at that. Here we have our prediction equation, and we see that we are going to calculate 10.423, which is our y-intercept plus our slope of 0.9922 times our x variable. And what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the cost of living index for 2006 for City 2, and it's our x variable, our explanatory or prediction variable. We will insert 118.2 for our x in our equation. So we will add our 10.423, our y-intercept, to 0.9922, our slope, times our 118.2, and that is our cost of living index variable for City 2. And I'll do it up here for you so you can see. I'm going to press equal. I'm going to type in 10.423 plus, I'm going to put in a parenthesis, 0.9923. The times is shift 8 for our asterisks and 118.2, and then I'll close those parentheses and I'm going to press enter, and I get 127.7. So our predicted value for the cost of living for 2007 for City 2 is 127.7. That's our predicted value. Now there's another way we can do this, and that is to perform a regression analysis in Excel. So to perform our regression analysis, we go to the top toolbar. In the center, we click Data. Then we go over to the right-hand side and click Data Analysis. Now, if you did not load your tool pack into your Excel, Data Analysis will not appear, so be sure to do that. Click Data Analysis, and this box will come up looking like this. Scroll down to where it says Regression, click Regression, click OK. Now I've already filled this in, but we can take a look. First, it's asking for our input of our Y range. So I will delete what I have in there so you can take a look at how I do that. I click on my data cell, and I am going to drag this all the way down to the end and release it. And then the same thing for our X range. I'll just index, drag it all the way down and release it. And then we go and we check labels because we have our index 2006 and index 2007 labels. Just check confidence level. It'll automatically have 95%. In my output range, I'm going to want that data in cell D1. So my output is going to be in D1. That's where I want the data to start to populate. And then I'm going to check residuals. That's very important. So check residuals, input your output range, check that radial button, check confidence level, check labels, input your Y range and your X range. If you're not getting the right answer, if you can't get the right answer, it may be because you put your X data where your Y data is. That happens quite frequently because of the way we set up our columns when we create scatter plots. So I'm going to click OK, and there we are. We have our summary output, and this calculates all the data that you need. It's going to provide you with all the information to respond to this question. So here we are. I just zoomed in on this a little bit. You see our intercept is 10.43 right here, our y-intercept, exactly what we got when we calculated it out based on the regression equation formula. And again, our slope is 0.9922. Now, if you come down and take a look at the residual output, you will see underneath that title there is a column entitled Observation. Go to this number 2, that's our City 2, and in our next adjacent cell we see the predicted index of 2007, and we see that that number is 127.7. That is the same solution that we calculated out with our formula. The only difference is that we did not have to do any math. So we have 127.7. That's our predicted value for the cost of living index for 2007 for City 2. So we then slide over to the residual column and see that our residual number is minus 1.2. And in our final question, we're asked to find the residual. And our residual is calculated by subtracting our predicted variable from our observed variable. Now, our observed variable is the data that we started with. And if we look at City 2, that would be our index 2007 variables. And our City 2 variable is 126.5. So I'm going to subtract 127.7 from 126.5 and I get a negative 1.2, exactly what we got here. We were given here actually in when we performed our regression analysis. Now what does this mean? This means that we overestimated in our regression model. We overestimated by 1.2 our predicted 2007 cost of living index. So that's an overestimation. If you go down to observation 4, which is City 4, we see that our predicted cost of living index for 2007 was 105. And if we go up to our observed values, it's 111.5. If we look at our residual, if we subtract 104 or 105 from 111.5, we get 6.5. And that's a positive number, and that means that we underestimated. Our regression model has underestimated our 2007 cost of living index. So that's basically all it is to it. It's easier, I think, if you do the regression analysis, if you perform it by clicking the data analysis, but you can certainly if you like to do math and you want to work the formula, or you can do both. So it really isn't that difficult. It's a lot of steps. It takes a lot of time, especially when you're new. And so we recommend that you go through all the steps. And if you have any problems at all, if you have any questions, if you don't understand something, please, please, please reach out to your tutors and your professors. We're here to help you.